So, Pembrokeshire Coastal Forum was founded in 2000. We're there to promote sustainable coastal zone management. What I'm showing you a picture of there is the Milford Haven Waterway. It's the stretch of water that's just outside our offices. It's perhaps not the classic picture of the Pembrokeshire coastline that you might expect. It's not St David's Head. It's not one of the areas along with the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park. But the waterway there is an area, a special area of conservation, and also you've got the industry there. We're into or promoting marine energy, principally because we see it as a way that we can combat climate change. Coastal communities like the one that you're looking there are under pressure from all sorts of impacts of climate change. Also, it's really important that as we move to a zero carbon future, that you can see a number of industries here, obviously not zero carbon, as we transition from fossil fuels and the jobs there, that the marine energy is one of the ways that people can have meaningful employment going forward into the future. With this aim, we have a marine energy education program. Here we are down at Milford Marina with Marine Power Systems wave sub device. There's a local primary school there. We take work with age groups from primary here, I think these guys are year 5, so they're 10-year-olds, all the way through to people at college doing level 2 and 3 entry into engineering. It's great to take kids out down to the coast like this and they can meet with, there's a couple of engineers in the picture here who have been working on the development of this device, but also it's important for the kids to see, just get my highlighter up, the other industries that are going on around the coast. Marine energy is really, using boats, marine connected careers, very much part of the social identity at the coast. And in the background here, you can see fishing boats. You can see a work boat here that would service the infrastructure around Milford Haven, but also probably just back from towing this marine energy device back. But also you can see the pilot boats here are unusually moored up inside the marina this day. And it's great for kids to see these and to actually see the different kinds of careers and stuff that's going on around the coast. So, this morning, it's billed as an introduction to marine energy. And principally, we're going to be talking about tidal range, tidal stream, and wave. And they make up the principal members of marine energy Wales. If you go online and you have a Google, you'll find all sorts of other different exciting marine energies too. But these 3 ways of generating electricity are the ones that are being developed in Wales, either technology-wise or in terms of size. More recently, we've also been involved supporting members who are looking to develop sites for floating wind. Floating wind is a really good addition to the marine energy portfolio. You're combining 2 proven technologies, and offshore wind has made an outstanding contribution already to the UK in terms of reducing the carbon footprint of our electricity supply. But the problem is it's only really suitable up to waters up to a certain depth, and floating wind makes the waters off the western Welsh coastline accessible to this renewable energy technology. So marine energy is part of the renewable energy family, and the slides that we've got here we produced for schools. There were two versions. There's a primary version, so a slideshow, both English and Welsh, and that's available for download from the Marine Energy Wales site. There are teacher's notes with it, so if you're a non-specialist, you can deliver it. There's a secondary version of this, which is aimed to cover the WJEC, so the Welsh Exam Board's Physics GCSE Module 1, or the combined double award Module 3. And they're freely available for download. They're all Creative Commons licensed, so if you're perhaps a developer or another organization that's watching this and thinking, oh, we could use those pictures or those slides in our own work, please do download them either from the MEW site, from the TESS site, or they're also available on the hub. Part of these resources are interactive, and this assessment for learning is very much used by teachers as they're going along. Really easy questions, I guess, just to check understanding comprehension you go along. It's not about getting them right. And if you want to play along at home, okay, you can have a quick go at naming 3 types of renewable energy, and then see if you've got them right. And by all means, not an exhaustive list there. Okay. So most of the electricity we use is made by electromagnetic induction. Kids love electromagnetic induction, and there's quite a thing about whether we should use long words when we're teaching. But certainly primary age, you know, you think about small children and their love of dinosaur names. They like this and learning the big words, and also being able to use them in the right context. But essentially, if we can move magnets, copper wire, we can make electricity. And the sea moves either with the tides, rising and falling, so a change in tidal height, in the currents that flow around our coastline as the tide rises and falls, or with the motion of the waves. And essentially, most of marine energy is about changing that movement into electricity. So tidal range is the first type of marine renewable I'm going to talk about today. It's probably the one that's most familiar, you're most familiar with. The tiny Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon would have been working on this principle, and there are also proposals for tidal range in North Wales. Tide comes in twice a day, and it falls twice a day. And that difference in height and the is called the tidal range. Principle is very straightforward, and the idea is to either trap the rising tide or the falling tide behind a wall, and for it to pass a turbine, which is like a big propeller. And as that spins, that moves the magnets and copper wire, and that makes electricity. Within tidal range, there are principally 2 main designs. There's the Barrage, which is like the Rants barrage in France. So that's a tidal range installation that has been running since the late 60s, or a tidal lagoon. Lagoons are the more preferred design these days because you're not blocking off a natural inlet. So blocking off an inlet has problems with disrupting migratory routes for things like fish, but also you're changing the salinity of the water trapped behind the barrage. So it's probably seen as being a much higher risk. Lagoons are a lower risk, but again, because you're enclosing a large area of sea, that is seen as being a higher risk, perhaps, compared to other marine energies. So I'm going to show you a few pictures of what these look like. This is actually the Rants barrage in France, and it illustrates quite nicely that these are large civil engineering projects with the risk and also the expense that's associated with this. And this one doubles up as the road crossing between Saint-Malo and Dinard. The barrage is actually the power plant under there is 240 megawatts, so that's about 80 of sort of commercial size wind turbines, the equivalent of, and it generates on as the tide comes in as the tide falls. If you're ever in the area, also under that road is a visitor centre, and you can actually go and see the generators and some interpretation in English and French around how the installation works. It's ran since, I think, 1968 and is still going to run for many years yet to come. And that is one of the hard things for tidal range development, is that its lifespan is so significantly longer than almost any other type of power plant. So if we're doing this with kids, we'd also get them to answer some questions as we're going along. So if you're playing along at home, you can have a go at how many high tides there are every day. And if you said 2, you're right. And one of the handy things, even though we're a coastal area, not all of the pupils that we work with actually spend much time at the beach. So actually realizing that if it was a good tide for playing football on the beach, that if they turn up an hour later the next day, the tide will be in exactly the same place, is actually quite a handy thing for them to know. And we're very much on promoting the coast for recreation as well. So the next thing I'm going to cover is tidal stream. Here's a fictional bit of the coastline. Looks a little bit like Ramsey Sound, could look a little bit like Skocum or Skomer. And you've got, as the tides come in each day, they are forced around headlands and in between islands, and that gives us higher tidal speeds, which would be ideal for tidal stream turbines. There. So there is something to consider when we're thinking about siting a tidal turbine. These areas here, where you've got the water moving, are extremely good for wildlife. You've got nutrient-rich water, and a lot of species use these areas perhaps to feed and so on. Also, you've got the additional thing that these are often the bits that we as people, we find possibly the most scenic and interesting parts of our coast. So you think about the coastline around Ramsey Sound. There is a certain thing about the island and the channel which we can tell by the Iron Age kind of archaeological evidence that our ancestors too found these absolutely special magical places. So careful thought needs to be given to siting things like tidal stream devices. So of the possible locations there are pros and cons to each of them. As it turns out, in Pembrokeshire, location C was the one that was more or less chosen by the Delta Stream device. Sheltered from the waves, some tidal resource, but not in any main wildlife pathways. We're starting to see a convergence in designs within tidal stream devices. They tend to look like wind turbines, but this one's blades are perhaps a little bit long actually on this installation. Stubbier blades, slow rotation, strongly attached to the seabed. And again, as they rotate, they're turning magnets, copper wire, making electricity. They don't have to go and look like that. The largest and tidal turbine in the world is a floating device. These have all sorts of advantages in terms of servicing, being much cheaper to install and can be moved. But there is obviously a visual impact there, which, as I mentioned earlier, some of these locations, people are particularly keen that they don't see human evidence of industrialization or kit being placed into them. So there is a balance to be struck. The other disadvantage of a floating device is it's more exposed to things, to the waves and the sea state. So it's also something else to be considered. Just show you a couple of devices here in real life. The Minesto device is in fact different to both of the ones I showed you before. It's a flying underwater kite and can take advantage of much slower tidal streams. And that, again, can take it, means it can be deployed perhaps from these areas which are away from these areas that have pressure on them in terms of wildlife. The device to the right is the Nova device. And there's an array of these deployed in Shetland, and they've successfully demonstrated the integration of their tidal generators with a Tesla battery store, so they can actually provide a constant or on-demand electricity supply to the national grid. Again, if we were doing this, if you're playing along at home, you can have a go. Check you're conscious, check you're awake, and see if you think it's A, B, or C. One of the things we do is we work with our MEW members to help sort of prepare education sessions and workshops, whether they're practical activities or slideshows, and making sure that it's not just a lecture and that there are questions and things for people to engage with as they go along is one of our key things that we try and promote. So onto waves. Now, wave devices there are many designs. Partly this is because as of the three areas, tidal range, tidal stream, and wave power, the wave developers are still far more in the innovation stage. But there is also another reason for there being a wide range of designs too, is that the waves themselves transfer energy in a variety of ways, and they are available as a resource in a variety of depths. So a quick animation here of one of the earliest wave devices. So this is the Limpet. It's a shore-mounted device, and it was demonstrated on the Isle of Islay in Scotland. Later, although this device is decommissioned, there is an array of very similar devices in Portugal still. Getting the power from the waves is a problem. With tidal stuff, you have got a stream and you can use a turbine and directly harvest the energy. But with waves, transferring that motion into rotation, which you can then use to drive a generator, is much, much harder. One way is to compress air, just like the Limpet does. And there's a range of other devices here. This one here is a rough representation of perhaps the Bombora device, which has lungs as the waves pass, possibly, well, many meters above it, are compressed, and they too are squishing air to drive a turbine. Things like the Polaris or the Marine Power Systems wave sub, they're relying on using hydraulics to convert the motion into a rotation, which then drive the magnets and copper wires and the generator to produce electricity to the grid. So if you're playing along, you can have a guess what makes the waves. So I'm going to show you a few more pictures now. So this is the mainstay site. It often doubles up as a car park, but they're constructing something very big at the minute, which is the Bombora M-Wave device. So this will be a demonstration that will be deployed off Pembrokeshire. Mainstay have been, and Bombora have been really great at hosting school groups over the past year to see this device under construction. It's really important that we get local schools and young people out to see these devices. The port itself is a secure environment. It's not the kind of place that you would wander into. The big blue crane in the middle there can pick up nearly well over 150 tons. So it's not the place to be wandering around and you will get squashed. But it's really important kids get into these sites, and because in the end you'll be what you see, and to see the different levels of engineering that's going on in the sheds, but also there are marine architects and other skilled professions going on there, and them understanding what goes into the design and development of this device like this is really, really important and hopefully inspiring. Even if they don't go on to a career in this industry, it's really, I think it's so important that everyone has an understanding of what it is, what the implications are, and what the pros and cons might be of us developing this technology. So, quick summary then, in terms of the advantages and disadvantages of the different technologies there. The industry itself is very mindful of disruption to wildlife. I don't think anyone here is looking to try and solve climate change, but then have a negative effect on the marine biodiversity. To date, whether it's tidal stream or wave power, there have not really been or haven't been observed impacts from the deployment of demonstration scales of those devices. The Tidal Range device I showed you in St Malo, because of the nature of that device, because they essentially dammed a freshwater inlet, they did notice significant degradation when it was put in, but within 10 years, the environmental monitoring showed that particular estuary had returned back to normal, but it is mindful of the risks there. One of the ways that Marine Energy Wales is helping to perhaps minimise those risks is through the development of the Marine Energy Test Area. So this is a series of consented sites. The first few of these sites are roughly, I'm probably colouring in the wrong bits, around the port of Pembroke and around this area here. That big yellow thing we were looking at, the car park, was here. This is where the Bombora device is at the moment. So close to the infrastructure there, so things can be put into the water. They can make sure there aren't any leaks. Individual components can be tested. Sensors and monitors can be tested. Developers can practice with equipment for retrieving and deploying their devices. And then devices can be moved further out to increasingly more exposed sites, which are closer to a real deployment site. And the idea here is partly it's of interest for them to check that it works from a technical point of view. But one of the things they're also observing is making sure things like noise levels are being kept within their designed parameters, because that means that devices are not being deployed into either high value from a biodiversity point of view, or just from a high value in terms of deployment and recovery point of view sites before there are any problems have been identified. So I'll leave you with the finishing slide there, but I'd also like to sort of flag up again that the slideshows are for both GCSE and for primary level resources are available on the Marine Energy Wales website. We also have links there to things like career guides, which are produced by the Port of Milford Haven as part of the Coastal Communities Adapting Together project, and links to the videos for an event for Pembrokeshire College engineering students, which I'm sure will also be of interest. So I'm going to stop sharing now and see if there are any questions.
Tim, we've got a first question from Sky Roberts on the Q&A section, which is asking, can you comment on any biomimicry marine technologies? Are there any in Wales? Can you see that question there in the Q&A?
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not aware of any biomimicry ones in terms of energy generation. I know that integrating things like paints and design of particular surfaces to enhance the marine environment and how things like seaweeds or small crustaceans interact with marine devices, that is definitely underway, and as well as how they might integrate with other sort of man-made structures in Wales, but I'm not aware of any biomimicry ones. However, if you leave that with me, my email, if you drop an email to education@marinenergywales.co.uk, I can have a little dig around and see if that's something being undertaken by any of our members.
Just popped your email there in the chat as well, Tim. We've also got a question from Emily Williams asking, do you think more monitoring is needed before we can be clear about impacts on wildlife?
Okay, so the answer is yes, if you want the absolute clear answer. And what I would say is that as I started to outline, with the part of the purpose of the test areas is to enable that monitoring to occur in a real sea environment. So Meta is a very early stage test site. So if you like, it's the step after being in a university test. So places like EMEC are in Orkney, Scotland, would be the next stage. So that's full open sea conditions. Devices are there for a relatively short period of time, perhaps 12 months. And it's during that the recording and certification in terms of risk to the marine environment should really, the bulk of the evidence needs to be collected there, and then when they deploy to a full-scale site, they can help minimize that risk. So there's a real important role, I think, for test sites there in sort of protecting the marine environment. Cool. Hello.
I don't think we've got any more questions so far, but if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function.
Okay. So I'm quite happy to hang around for the next 5-10 minutes. So if anybody wants to ask anything, please do pop it in the chat, and that will try and get back to you. Otherwise, I think Manon's put my email in the chat. Please do feel to drop me a line. Like I say, the resources are there to be used. We've just had an updated version of the marine energy task for the Welsh Baccalaureate. So if anybody knows any students that are at GCSE level, they can do an activity looking at marine energy and its potential to contribute to the wellbeing goals for Wales. So please do check that out, and we'll be putting resources up to support that on the Marine Energy Wales website in the future.
We've got another question on the Q&A. Are there any studies on disturbance to fish via any of the methods used?
Okay, so part of the deployment of the Delta Stream device in Ramsey Sound was a big study by CCAMS, which are a joint study of marine energy impacts between Bangor University and Swansea University. And I'm sure if you were to dig, you can find information there. And more recently, there has been a large global study which has brought together research from deployments from all over the world, and it is the I'm going to have to ask Madeline to jump in. Is it the state of the sector? Is that right?
State of the science.
State of the science report, and that would be it's within the last month that is out, and that will give you the most up-to-date information.
And then we've got a question from Sky Roberts. How can students and graduates get involved with the marine energy projects? Okay, so it depends on which level. So a number of the Welsh universities are very much engaged with marine renewables, as are Exeter University springs to mind, and Heriot-Watt University would all have those kind of units embedded within their course. If you can also, we host people on work experience. We probably don't have any placements coming up this side of Easter, but we also host people from a number of disciplines. We've had students from with legal backgrounds, as well as marine biologists and people doing renewable energy. And we're always pleased to host people, and we will. And if you subscribe to the Marine Energy Wales newsletter or follow the social media, if there are any sort of internships or offers in that way, we promote those too. Thanks, Tim. Well, don't have any others at the Q&A at the moment, or the chat. I've popped in some resources to the State of the Science report, the CCAMS research programme, and I'll pop in the link to the MEW newsletter as well as our social media channels. Oh, we've got one more question from Lucy Mann. Do you get issues with plastics affecting the turbines?
I've never heard of that. Generally, they are rotating quite slowly, so it would so you don't get that kind of wrapping around effect that you might expect. So.
Okay, I think we've got through the questions on the Q&A and the chat. But as Tim mentioned, if you've got any more questions, I'll pop the education email address at the bottom of the chat once more, just so you don't miss it.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim.
Well, thank you very much for everybody giving up their time and coming along this morning. I hope that was useful in some way for you.